And someone just joined. Okay. I am calling this meeting of the Public Safety Communications Task Force to order. It is 10:03 on September 21st, and I'm Barbara Neal. The meeting's being recorded, and the recording will be posted on the task force webpage following the meeting. Quick roll call. Commissioner Morrison is here. Paul White is here.
Good morning.
Morning. Jim Mack is here. Morning, Jim.
Here.
And myself for task force members, we do not have Michael Wright, Mike Dungis, or Ron Kumitz at this point, but we do have a quorum. Also joining us is Sonny Johnson, filling in for Callie Audette, and a few members of the public. I see if you'd like to introduce yourself and any affiliation you'd care to share. I'll go around the room here. I'll start with Philip Sisk.
Good morning. Phil Sisk here for Mission Critical Partners. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Derek.
Good morning, Derek Wieczorek with Altiris, together with Jim Morgan and Richard Townend.
Okay, great. Well, welcome to you all. Okay, I don't see any other members of the public on the call, so we'll move to approval of the agenda. Sounds like maybe you do have a change, Commissioner?
No, I don't have a change to the agenda.
Okay, does any other task force member have a change to the agenda? Alrighty. Hearing none, we will consider the agenda approved and move on to public comment. I think we could allow about 5 minutes for public comment. Does anyone from the public wish to speak? Okay. Seeing no hands, we will move on to the next section of the agenda. So discuss the big RFP bidder questions and responses. And also on the updated agenda, we added a discussion of the content of the draft legal services RFP. And I'll just do my standard reminder of earlier discussions from the task force that it's unusual to publicly discuss the contents of an RFP while it is open for bidding. And the public discussions of the contents could disrupt the RFP process by injecting comments and statements outside of the RFP that could influence the bidding process. So that said, that's the reminder that in order to move into executive session, the task force must first make a finding that premature general knowledge of the responses to the questions, and in this case, the content of that draft RFP, would put the task force at a substantial disadvantage. Is there such a motion? Yep.
Can I separate the two?
Sure.
I don't believe we need to go into executive session to talk about the RFP for legal services.
Okay.
I don't believe it will put us at a substantial disadvantage. So if we can separate the two, I'd like to discuss the legal, the RFP for legal services first.
Okay.
Which I believe we can do in open session if the group sees fit, and then take up the second issue of the big RFP.
Fair enough then. So let's just, I'm sure you'll all remember my introductory reminders about what we have to do, but why don't we just move then to a discussion of the legal services RFP, and then when we're ready, we'll go into the executive session at the appropriate time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would like to share my screen with the members of the task force and any members of the public who want to see it, to see the draft that my team has worked up, incorporating much of the feedback that Kim Chaney offered for this relatively straightforward RFP to secure legal services. And I also wanted to remind members of the task force that whatever we approve as a draft still has to get the approval of the Attorney General. It is up to the Attorney General as to whether or not we are allowed to go hire independent legal counsel. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But with your consent, if you all agree that that would be okay to discuss in public session, I would like to share my screen so we can discuss the draft RFP for legal services.
I guess I would like to understand how discussing the draft RFP of the legal services, you know, the content would be different than discussing the draft content of, you know, the big RFP and the little RFP, which we did hold an executive session. Are we not introducing a,
It's, to me, this is a really generic legal service that there's no technical specs. There's no, the scope of the work is pretty common in the legal field. To me, there's nothing particularly,
Yeah, there's nothing that any potential bidder could claim was proprietary. It's just,
right,
it's
nothing
law.
proprietary in here.
It's law.
okay, all right, well, that, I'll defer to that then. I just wanted a little clarification on that.
Okay, everybody good with me sharing my screen to talk about this RFP?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
I see the mayor has joined us, so you're aware.
Yes. Okay,
And for those
And-
of us who don't have a screen, can we get an email copy of the slide deck or whatever it is?
it's not a slide deck, it's just a draft, it's marked draft. I can try and do that, but let me get through this first, hold on. Okay,
And
Stephen, hold on, I'm trying to do that. Actually, I don't want to do that while I'm sharing my screen, so. Barb, I'm going to share this doc with you, even though it's just a draft sitting on my thing. Can you try and send a Word version or a PDF version to Stephen?
Mm-hmm.
if y'all would oblige a public comment, we got in late and others had trouble logging into last meeting too. So.
All right, can we come
Jen's
back to
done.
that? Because I'm in the middle of sharing my screen.
Sure.
I'm fine with coming back to
Yeah,
public
sure.
hearing if you want, Barb.
Yes, yeah, we can do that.
Okay. All right, so I did not bother you all with the template language that comes with the standard state contracts and the procurement office because the meat of this is the scope and the background. The RFP by DPS on behalf of the Public Safety Communications Task Force is seeking to establish contracts with one or more entities that can provide professional legal services to the task force as it oversees and manages the transition to a statewide, reliable, secure, and interoperable public safety communications system and fulfills the requirements established in, and it cites the portions of the Act. The task force is seeking legal services for providing general legal services to the task force, including compliance with open meeting law and advising the task force during executive sessions of its regularly scheduled meetings. Advising the task force regarding municipal law, intermunicipal agreements, and municipal relations generally as applicable to the task force's duties set forth in, cites the law. Assisting with recommending and developing governance structure or structures for multi-member municipal entities seeking to provide regional dispatch services consistent with the law, the big bill, which instructs the task force to develop findings and recommendations. It goes on to quote the law. Examples of potential structures may include union municipal districts, interlocal contracts, fire mutual aid systems, county sheriff contracts with member towns, and/or municipal regional planning districts. Legal experience in the following areas is desired. 1, advising Vermont municipalities on issues of municipal governance and administration. 2, familiarity with Vermont police, fire, or emergency medical provider legal structures and operations. 3, familiarity with other intergovernmental structures identified above. 4, familiarity with state or federal grant administration and the state RFP process, including compliance with Vermont grant requirements set forth by the Agency of Administration. And 5, compliance with the open meeting law and related topics affecting public bodies in Vermont. That is the scope, and the rest of it, it sits right inside the template from the procurement office. And I would welcome feedback at this point from task force members.
Does the rest of that template get into at all I mean, I assume we want a Vermont attorney, somebody who's here, that knows our landscape.
Well, they
I
have to
assume,
be,
I
they
assume
have to
that
be
the-
admitted to the bar, right?
That's right. That's, I guess, I assume that's would be in the template.
I'll find out.
Is there, am I gathering that there's a separate legal services template that's separate from other templates in the RFP process?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Any other feedback from members of the task force? I'd like to thank Mr. Kim Cheney for his input that we incorporated into this. And just a reminder to task force members that once we approve a draft, it still has to go to the Attorney General's office for approval to have outside counsel. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this point. And I would make the motion that this be the accepted draft for the scope and background of the legal counsel RFP, and that our procurement team move ahead with placing this into the RFP template and forwarding to the Attorney General's office.
So moved.
I'll second.
All seconds. Excellent.
Any discussion?
When, I assume when we get responses back, we will assemble like we have with these other two RFPs and look at them as a group. It would be, in other words, it would be us making the decision, not the Attorney General's office.
That's correct. I mean, listen, that's correct as far as I know at this moment. I've
Right.
been wrong before in my assumptions.
Right. Haven't we all?
Okay. I don't see any other discussion, so go ahead, Barb, let's call the question.
Okay. All in favor of the motion on the floor? Say aye, raise your hands, it's easier, thank you. I see all
Aye.
task force members have their hands raised. You got that, Sonny? Okay. Excellent. Now we go back to public comment. Is that the
Will of the group?
will of the group?
Sure.
Okay. Stephen, when we asked for public comment earlier, no one raised their hand. I'll give you an opportunity to go first, and then I'll just do a double check with the remaining people. So Stephen, go ahead.
Yeah, phone call-ins don't get an opportunity to raise their hand, but I was late anyway. I took a call from Kim Cheney to let him know there was a little bit of confusion. Sonny clarified the difference between the two agendas that were sent out for me this morning. Thank you.
Yes, yep, I emailed you. I hope you got it.
I heard several people had difficulty getting into the meeting a couple days ago, and I don't know, I don't have the facility to examine the background links or figure out why that happened. But I would just caution that, people did voice that. I don't know whether we can test these links before meeting time. That might be a suggestion worth exploring. But that's just for the record. I think I want to commend Jen's taking the initiative and getting that RFP draft together. One thing that came to mind, I think it said reliable, and I don't know whether the statute says reliable versus resilient. It's kind of inconsequential, but in the scope and background beginning. I think that's probably enough for now. The time is of the essence to try to have you all just I wonder the fact that this RFP and the scope of the need for legal services was not really discussed. I'm glad you did this walk through in open session. But the proposal to discuss it in executive session before the task force has even talked about, municipal regional governance expertise or, fire mutual aid. I mean, there's horror stories about how fire mutual aid is running things in central Vermont. So I guess I would encourage y'all to do more open public homework on these things. Again, in the interest of time, I commend Jen's initiative in getting this ready. And the next one in the hopper is the financial study of funding sources, which I've sent to some of you to deliberate and decide where to prioritize it. But that's probably good for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. One more opportunity. Is there anybody else that would like to make public comment? Okay. Seeing none, we'll jump back to the next agenda item, which is the big RFP bidder questions and responses. Where we left off was whether or not there is a motion to make a finding that premature general knowledge of the responses to these questions would put the task force at a substantial disadvantage.
I
Is
would
there-
make that motion that we go into executive session for the narrow purpose of finalizing our answers to bidder questions and that we emerge from executive session to take action.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Jim. Actually, I'm sorry. I think I call this a point of order, right, Paul? First, Jen, we need to
We
make
have
the
to-
finding about the premature general knowledge. So would you like to withdraw that motion? And
I would like to withdraw it and put it on the shelf and bring
Yep.
it right back out, whip it right
Okay.
back out as soon as we make the first finding.
okay, so is there a motion to make a finding that premature general knowledge of the response to the bidder questions would put the task force at substantial disadvantage?
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Paul.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jim. And is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye and/or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All the task force members have indicated aye, and the task force has made that finding. Now, Jen, I believe you have a motion on a shelf.
Sonny's got it in the transcript. That
Okay.
motion is off the shelf and on the field.
Okay.
And seconded.
And seconded Jim. And then a vote to move into executive session under the conditions that are stated in the motion. All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Aye.
All the task force members are in favor, and we will move to executive session at 10:20 in the other meeting link. We'll see you there.
Can I just ask how many members are present here? Is it only 4? Everybody's
Yeah,
already left.
Mayor Don just had jumped in briefly and then he jumped back out again. So it's Jen, Barb, myself, and Jim Mack.